This is the Wealth Standard Radio, your gold standard in everything financial.
Hey everyone, this is Patrick Donohoe. Welcome to this morning's episode of the Wealth Standard Radio. And boy, do we have a good one for you today. This is episode 168, and we are calling it the Economics Trump-Hillary. Economics of Trump-Hillary.
I like that.
You like that?
Yeah. Or am I jumping in too early? Do I need to wait for the actual introduction?
Let's go back. I'm just kidding. So let's introduce Chunga.
Hey.
Let's introduce Chunga.
It's about time, man.
This is honestly, the topic is going to be cool. Right?
I think so.
But even cooler is actually doing a podcast with you. You're like for the Dos Equis guy, right?
Yes.
They should replace him with you.
I have campaigned.
You have?
Yeah.
I think you need some gray hair. You need some gray hair.
Oh, please. I'm gray as an old mule. Look at my dyed hair. I could have the gray hair in a second.
Yeah, by the way, go on, if you guys want to check us out live and in color, we're on YouTube, so go check us out on the YouTube channel. We have our last, 6-7 episodes on there.
Great fun.
But anyway, yeah, you're one of, if not one of the most interesting
I've had a
men
very
in the world.
blessed and very charmed life, without a doubt.
Well,
I think I'm more like Forrest Gump than I am.
Well, you're a cool. You played goalie. You played hockey.
Hockey player for about 23 years.
You love music.
Huge music guy. I played guitar since I was in 8th grade, and I've been an EDM DJ, touring the world, playing electronic dance music.
Yeah. So you were a local celebrity. Or are a local celebrity here in Salt Lake. You were on what stations again? 96?
I was one of the original DJs that started a station called X96. And after doing that for about 5 years, I went on to found 107.5 The End.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah,
which then changed to 101.9 The End.
Got it. So
and did that for a long time.
So you're like, and you've given me great pointers of how to do radio. And
I
probably don't listen because I don't know.
I'm always afraid when I give you pointers, you're like, psh, whatever.
Chunga. No, I'm just kidding.
Got this down, son.
But it's awesome to have you here. And I know that you did a little stint in Boston doing some political talk radio.
I did a WTKK 96.9 Boston Talks, which sadly is no longer around anymore. It was one of the casualties of the broadcast radio industry, which is, in decline, as I think everybody knows, with digital technology being what it is. Sadly, radio is not what it used to be.
Well, I'm going to turn the time over to you in just a second for Trump-Hillary, the economics of Trump-Hillary. But before so I never told you this, but I went to a podcast conference a couple years ago.
Okay.
And at the conference, it was fascinating because you had all these like entrepreneurial guys that were, they had their iPad, they had a little mic on their iPad, and they were, getting millions of downloads. But then you had these like old school radio guys.
Yep.
And it was fascinating because you had, I remember a couple of sessions where one of the guys was up there. And he was old school. He was like an architecture podcast or whatever. And he was going through like the entire week. And he'd say, okay, well, on Monday, we spend 2 to 3 hours scripting this. And then Tuesday, we do a practice run and we cut out. And then Wednesday, we do like an audio test and we script this and do this. And then, finally by Friday is when we'll have the final one done. And then there's this girl that got up right after. And she was like an actress. She does the women, I can't remember the name of the podcast. Super famous podcast.
Is she an actress that you know?
I don't know. I don't remember her name. She was the African American girl on Friends. She's
so she's done stuff.
She's done a lot of stuff. Yeah. So she got up and she's like, expletive. That guy's full of, and said, I get 10 times as many downloads as him. And here's what I do for my podcast: plug in the mic, interview the person, do the edits, upload, done. And it was funny because that was, I guess, one of the examples, but it just showed, there was a couple other like panels where it was very, very similar dynamic where you had these old school radio guys and then you had like the new school podcast guys.
Well, I think the best podcast probably lies somewhere in between those two.
Yep.
I had a real battle coming out of radio. I run a network called Podbash, podbash.com. Go check it out. I got a slime for my stuff.
Promotion.
Yeah, exactly. So, I had a real battle coming out of radio and realizing that podcasting is an entirely different animal, and there is a charm to maybe not having the quality be so good, and there's a charm to maybe not having everything be quite so polished. There's maybe an honesty and a credibility that was lost in the broadcast industry that people are really responding to, especially if you have a neck beard, engaged ears, and, which is what a lot of podcast listeners do. Yeah. So
that's the fad. That's the fad these days. Is those the neck beards and,
I don't get it.
And the stash.
Not at all. I don't get it. I shave every day, or almost every day.
My wife would kill me. So it's gonna be awesome to do this. 'Cause I've been looking forward to this for a while. But let's would you want to?
This is. I'm really glad you had me on this particular show because I do have a political background. I've been lucky enough to do some media consulting for political figures, some high name political figures, and I think there's probably a lot of people that listen to the Wealth Standard Radio every single week, or that may be coming in that may be a little bit younger, that either A, may not understand your background because you are a very humble man and you don't talk about your background very much, or that may not understand the implications that politics has on the economy. Everybody hears, well, we all remember the crash of 2008 and 2009, and we all know that George W. Bush and his administration, if you are left-leaning, you tend to blame that administration for those problems, and vice versa. And listen, it can go on and on and on. But beyond that, I think a lot of people may not quite understand the implications of an election on the economy, even the election itself. So I've got tons of questions for you because you have guys like Andy Tanner on the show. You have guys like Will Street, who is awesome and a very funny guy, also very knowledgeable. And you tend to kind of fire off the questions, but nobody, at least from what I've heard, tends to go, okay, Patrick, you're in the hot seat.
This will be a first, I think.
Is it really?
I don't know.
This is a first?
I think I've been on by myself and asked myself questions. So
we see him do that in the halls too.
Oh, man.
And we're thinking, oh, Patrick's having a day. Just leave him alone. So this is what I would like to do with you is maybe with your economics background, for people who don't know, that's what you studied in school. Where did you go to school, first of all?
I went to a college up in upstate New York called Marist College, and then transferred to University of Utah. Finished up there.
Okay.
Yep.
And you spent all of that time studying economics. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yep.
So with an economics background, this should be a breeze for me to be able to say, okay, Hillary Clinton, Donald Trump. What does all this mean with regard to the average layperson who may not follow the election or the economy every single day?
Well, I would say the first thing is, the formal education I got, I don't think really compares to what I studied after. So I got into just once I started to dive into kind of the history of economics, after I graduated, I started to read and learn a lot more about it, because there was some left-leaning curriculum associated with University of Utah,
right?
Where it focused a lot
with
on
most universities, actually. I mean, that's pretty much the standard now, is it not?
Yeah, it's very kind of demand-oriented, and what that means is that it's the government trying to create demand in the economy so that the economy will grow, right? So that's a very Keynesian side of things, and we can get into that with 2008, 2009, as well as what we're gonna talk about with Trump Hillary.
That must have been very interesting for you to be a capitalist going to a left-leaning school.
Yeah.
And studying the economy. Did you have a lot of left-leaning people studying economics?
I don't know. I don't even know if I was a capitalist then. I don't even know if I'm a capitalist now. I'm kind of like a quasi, just cluster, I guess.
You're like Tigger.
Tigger.
You're the only one.
Yeah, but I would say, one of the things with Keynes, I just didn't, the idea that, you had a central body that was mandating this and this and this and trying to control things. I never saw that ever work, and I really wasn't able to articulate it at that point. But I saw that when you do have kind of like a centralized type of planning, where I think the motivations are genuine. Okay, the motivations are good, but it rarely works out, because you still have a human being that's dictating policy, this, or this. And in the end, human beings are irrational, and you never know how they're going to behave.
Sure.
But yet, the economic side of things is, they have these calculated, well, if we do this, then this will happen, and then that'll happen, and then we'll have this output. And it's like, okay, yeah, but there's so many variables in between. And all those variables relate to human nature.
Right, and people are panicky and jittery, and yeah, it's like herding cats.
Well, they should do this if this happens. Yeah, but they might not. And then it totally screws up the whole model. So that's one of the things I didn't really, and I still haven't seen it, is that you're never going to have this like utopia perfect world, right? Because people are always going to make decisions that you never expect. And that's where I would say...
Can I just tell you, look, I want to stop you right there for a second if I can, because this could possibly turn into an entire podcast series, because there are so many financial experts that I follow or that I see on the news or that I read, and every single one of them talks about financial conditions in an ideal world. Yeah. Or there are, I don't want to call anybody out because it's just not appropriate for me, but Dave Ramsey, who will say something, well, here, it's really simple. Don't spend more than you make. Don't have credit cards. Don't use credit. Don't do this. Don't do that. And in an ideal world, that's a very, very simple thing to do. However, in a credit-based society, I just don't know how realistic it is.
Well, I also think it's the motivation there, because is his motivation genuine? It is, because I think he's seen harmful situations because of debt. But at the same time, I've seen families. There was an ad that I love. I need to pull it up for you. But there's this guy that posted this classified ad that said, "I'm selling my Les Paul. I'm selling my amps because Dave Ramsey is making me sell all of our doodads or goodies so we can get all of our debt paid off." So it's kind of like.
Thanks for a great life, doesn't it?
Seriously, and that's the point, is when you sacrifice. Now, I'm not saying that the advice is bad. I'm just saying that, life is about our experiences. Life is about, our families, our relationships. And if you start to, alienate that because of not doing this or not doing that. Now, again, you have to be a good steward over your resources. But I would say in the end, if you sacrifice those things which were meant to be here for, then in the end, you're going to wind up with some money, but nothing else.
Well, you just kind of made my point. I mean, to me, it's very, very simple. Life is all about experiences. At the end of the day, you can't take it with you. Yep. You're not going to go into the ground going, man, that dude had a 0 FICO score. Yeah. He was so awesome. Look at his massive house he had and no credit.
They're not going to put your credit score on your gravestone.
Yeah, his kids don't know him. They're all writing books about him. But man, what a great man. Yeah, to me, that just doesn't seem very realistic.
Yeah, but also, I mean, it's the same thing as, any advice. I would say that the motivation behind it is good. But in the end, you have to really kind of see between the lines. And I think that, we'll get into the politics, but I think, the financial talking heads, they're more demagogues than anything else, where it's just like, you do this and you do this and you're dumb if you don't and you're dumb. It's one of those things where they're the overlord, you're the neophyte that doesn't know anything, and you should just do everything that they say.
It's pretty amazing to me that there are as many people drinking the Kool-Aid as there are. Because those people, look, I watch them, I do study them, I read them. I have a lot of problems with what they say, just like we've said, and I don't want to belabor the point, but they do tend to go with the path of least resistance to a stress-free life, which in my opinion is not stress-free at all. Yep. And it's not much of a life. And I would really like to see somebody like you. Maybe we can do a podcast series about this. Tell us how to do it in a realistic manner, in a real world scenario where we don't have to give up everything, our Les Paul and our amplifiers. We don't have to give up all that kind of stuff to have a good life.
Well, I wrote an ebook, and gosh, I can't remember what it's called. I think it's like how to get a 10% raise every year for life or whatever. But the idea of that book was, when you earn income, money comes from somebody else, and money comes from somebody else because you provided value. Sure. Right? The fact that you can provide value means that there's something about you that is important to somebody else. Right. That is not there's not this cap on it. Right? There's not a cap on the value you can provide to somebody. You can provide, it's an infinite amount. Why does Mark Benioff or Bill Gates or these huge tech giants do so much and have so much wealth? Is because they figured out a way to create a ton of value for a ton of people. And it doesn't mean you have to go out and do that. But what I'm saying is that, the 10%, earning, increase your income by 10% per year is possible if you figure out ways to educate yourself. It's personal development, and it's really saying, okay, what are my skills? What are my traits? What am I good at? And how can I take that and provide that to somebody else so that they will find it valuable enough to give me some of their money?
And then, of course, making your assets work for you.
Exactly. And that's where you say, right there, that's one of the best investments that you can make. And, if you are earning more, then you can have experiences and do things and so forth. So I would say, if you were to choose the path between, sacrificing everything fun and getting rid of all of your debt versus figuring out a way to educate yourself and be more valuable to your employer or be more valuable to your patrons, I mean, clearly the choice is that. It may be a little bit harder, Okay. But
Sure.
in the end, that is really, I would say what adds to the experience of life. And really it gives you more gratification than to look at your bank account with, a couple $1,000s in there and no credit card debt.
Have you seen those ads, those DirecTV ads? I don't think they're on anymore, but it has the settlers. Have you seen those ads that you've got the neighborhood and it's all nice big houses and then you have the settlers
that are settlers.
I always kind of joke, Dave Ramsey. That's Dave Ramsey. Right there, that's him.
Yeah, it's the guy that, it spends $10 in gas to go across town to save 5 cents per gallon or something.
Yeah, I know those guys.
Yeah, it's crazy.
They drive me crazy.
And the idea is it's like to them there's a logical point which, convinces them that that's the right thing to do. But at the same time, you look at the other side of it, and it's like, yeah, okay, that's logical, and you have a gain there, but look at what it costs you. And nobody ever looks at the cost of doing it.
Right. Well, speaking of the cost, we did start this episode saying, hey, look, let's take a look at the election. Let's take a look at Trump and Hillary. Is the first question I would have, and I think a lot of people have this question, is can the election cycle, before the actual election takes place, can that affect the economy?
For sure. Oh yeah.
When you have the primaries and then when you have the general election, does that affect the economy in a positive or a negative way?
Well, it depends. I mean, it depends on what the market sees, right? So if you look at whether it's jobs announcements or GDP or statements by the Federal Reserve or unemployment numbers or new jobs created. I mean, there are these expectations that are set in advance of the announcement, right? And the market prices that in. And so if the announcement actually holds true to that, to that initial announcement or that initial, survey, then typically the market's not going to do much at all. It's really the market takes a dive when the actual data is in contradiction or different than what the announcement was in the beginning.
So do people like the Fed? Let's take the Fed for example. When you have an election cycle such as this one, where the candidates are extremely polarized. What does Wall Street do? What does the Fed do? Do they react based on say Trump, a Trump video comes out or Hillary says something crazy? Does Wall Street react to that? Does the Fed react to that typically?
No, I don't think Wall Street's reacting to that yet. And right now, I think Janet Yellen and the Federal Reserve, I mean, their agenda is pretty clear. They want X amount of growth and they want X amount of unemployment, and they're willing to do this in order to get that. And it's just the same policies they've had for a long time. And really, if you look at election years, there's typically not a lot of change that happens, right?
Everybody waits.
Yeah, they'll wait till after, and that's where the markets will start to really go one direction or the other. And it's going to really be, based on what, Hillary's proposals are or what Trump's proposals are. Now, it's bizarre to me because it's not like they can wave a magic wand and suddenly change everything, right? They can't do that.
No,
right? There's this,
our nation was designed to move much slower than that. Yeah. I think a lot of people may not understand that. Yeah, thankfully, so that we can't knee jerk.
Exactly.
Our system is set up to move very, very slowly.
Yep.
That is one of the things that kind of bugs me about the election is that there's all this talk thrown around. It's bandied about by both candidates about change and immediate change, and our system isn't set up like that.
Yeah, I mean, you look at, I know Hillary has said that, well, I'm going to put, my husband in charge of the economy because he did so well back in the day. But it's like he didn't even do any of that. It was Congress that did it, right? Because Congress was, the majority was GOP. So it's one of those things where the credit given to the president, I don't think is often earned by the president. But and the other way around, right? When you look at really the Bush, what happened with that, the bubble in the real estate market and the subsequent crash, right? You look at, well, it was Bush's fault. It's like, well, a lot of the policies that created lax lending standards were before Bush.
Yeah, I never looked at it like it was his fault.
And so it's kind of like everybody, they're the scapegoat and they're the hero, right? And I don't think that's
neither
fair.
Are accurate.
Yep. They're supposed to be a leader. They're supposed to be a leader, right? The leader is supposed to inspire. It's supposed to bring people together. That the role of the president, I think, has changed drastically over the last couple hundred years, and is
it more important or less important?
I think it's more important, but for the wrong reasons. Because it's one of those things that's creating. And I think both parties right now are guilty of it, but they create kind of like a warfare amongst each other, right? Where it's like, well, this party is this, and this party is that, and we're this way, and we're that way, and we're going to do this for you, and we're going to do that for you. And I don't know, that's to me, that's not leader, because you create factions. And when you're a leader, you unite. When you're a leader, you inspire, you motivate. And I think that, there are some presidents in history that have, they've exemplified that, that role. But right now, I just don't see that in either of them, because they're very they're demagogues, and they're also, very partisan.
Yeah, well, and I know that I'm sure there are a lot of people that are listening right now that will say, well, that may have studied history in college. If you go clear back to even to Thomas Jefferson and Andrew Jackson and their fights that they had, there were some very partisan, very bitter battles that were fought. Even clear back then, really nasty things said about one another. However, there always seemed to be a coming of the minds after the election took place, and I don't really see that happening. I haven't really seen it happen. I would probably say since Reagan. I was really young when Reagan was around, but it seemed to me that everybody kind of coalesced behind him. And since then,
well, he was an inspiring figure. I mean, he was nice. He was personable. I mean, he was an actor, but he was personable. And I think that, and JFK was very similar, where there's a natural attraction. And I think Obama kind of possessed that to a degree. Yeah. Okay. But there's some things I think that he did that that all went away. But I think that the people are, when they're honorable, when they're motivational, when they're inspiring, okay, that is what I think people want in a leader and a president.
Would you say that either one of these candidates are inspiring or honorable?
No, I think, and it's unfortunate because, we have there's an interview that we did a few years ago with Donald Trump Jr. Yeah. And I got to spend some time with him, and he's, incredibly personable guy. Right. Intelligent, humble, very, he's
engaging,
articulate, understanding of what we were. It was a great experience. And I was hoping that would, some of those characteristics would come out, in the campaign with Trump. But it's just gone kind of the other direction, unfortunately.
It's a little spooky to watch.
It is. Yeah, it's sad, I think.
I keep falling back on history. I do. As somebody who's studied politics, I keep falling back on history that, look, even during the Reagan campaign, things were pretty nasty. Between him and George Bush Sr., they were pretty bad. And then with him and Jimmy Carter, they were pretty bad. And no one remembers that, I think. And that's what I'm kind of hoping here, is that people don't remember the fights that were fought. Is that even the right way? I don't even. Anyway, I don't know that people will remember those.
I think it's going to be hard.
I think you're right. I think you're very, very right, and that concerns me a little bit. And so I found myself kind of wondering, especially during the debates last Sunday, I found myself wondering, well, I wonder what happens to the economy if Hillary wins or if Donald Trump wins. Who would be better for the economy? And I want to try and be as nonpartisan as I can be, because, much love and respect. I happen to be one of those people that I don't think the nation can exist without the two sides. If you have one side that's in power for too long, you have corruption. Yep. And it goes both ways. Yep. So I think the checks and balances need to be there. So I want to try and be as bipartisan as I can with this question for you. But which president do you think would be better for the economy and for finance and for insurance and things like that?
Well, I would say I think it's important to step back and understand what the economic plans are, because I think both of them are flawed in my perspective. Okay. I wouldn't know how to put one of those together. I have ideas from a philosophical standpoint, but they have so much data and so many ways to if we
that you don't have access to.
And so, but at the same time, from a principle, easy to understand standpoint, I think people are very misled when it comes to how an economy works, right? And so I think there's kind of two distinguishing paths. Okay, the first path is the government initiates change. Okay, so what that means is, from a Hillary standpoint, they tax. And the upper class has to pay their fair share. We keep hearing that, which I'll get to in a second. Right. And it's it increases tax revenue. Right. Where does that tax revenue go? In a perfect world, right, the tax revenue goes to
government programs.
It goes to government programs to build a road and do infrastructure here. But here's the deal. You look at Hillary's plan, and I think it would bring an extra like $500 billion to in revenue. Mm-hmm. But the thing is, we have $20 trillion in debt, right? And we are spending
and rising,
and we're spending right now, and her spending is going to go up a little bit. $1 trillion in debt every year. So it's kind of like if you have 20 trillion and you're adding 1 trillion to that, and you bring in, I think it's like we bring in like 5 trillion in tax revenue. So that you look at the interest on that debt plus the deficit spending, it's like
it's
not going to go
non-fixable.
It's not going to go to infrastructure, right?
Right.
So my point is, if there was no debt, okay, and it was a balanced budget, right? They couldn't add to the deficit, then it may make sense, right, for some of her initiatives from a principled standpoint. But right now, it doesn't. So, but also, in the traditional sense of the word, is that the government's role, right? The government's role is not necessarily to stimulate that type of change or that type of economic growth.
Well, that's where I have the problem. I have problems on both sides of the aisle. For the record, again, we're being bipartisan here, nonpartisan, I should say. But when the left is embracing social program after social program after social program as kind of their narrative, that is their platform,
yep.
At least over the past, I would think probably 15, 20 years, it's all social issues that are their platform.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It does worry me from an economic standpoint. Okay, social programs, they make people feel good at a certain income level, but before long, everyone is at that income level if all you're focusing on are social programs.
But at the same time, you also look at really, there's there's a book by Robert Kiyosaki. It says that A students work for C students and B students work for the government. So
wow,
and it's a fascinating book. But the idea is you have the government is trying to really take money and there's really no strings attached, right? And they're trying to take it and initiate growth. They're trying to do this and this and looking at programs. I think there are certain programs that maybe warrant tax revenue, but in the end, what's really going to create the growth? And I would say it's those that have skin in the game, and there is a scarcity component, which is they can lose. Right,
yeah.
The government can't lose with private nature. They can lose. Now, looking at Trump and just with and this is interesting because I'm surprised he didn't really use this train of thought when it came to his taxes. But with Trump, I mean, he paid.
Are you talking
about
his personal taxes? This is what you're talking about.
And then I'll gravitate toward his economic policy, which is still kind of Hillary-ish, but it's still similar.
Okay.
Or it's still similar to his personal tax situation.
Okay.
But so if you look at the tax revenue that comes in, it's $5 trillion ish, okay, per year.
Okay.
If you look at the tax credits, okay, based on individuals putting money into a specific part of the tax code, it's like 20 trillion. So what that means is, if let's say it's a billionaire that puts $1 billion or $500 million into a housing assisted or a low income housing project, or they put money into charity, or they have a building and they depreciate the value of that building and don't have to pay as much tax on that. Okay, that's stimulating the economy, right? That is creating housing. Okay, it is basically
and jobs
putting
to build that
jobs and so forth. But you look at really what he did. Congress is the one that created all of the different parts of the tax code, and they do that so that people will put money there. They're incentivizing them to say, "Listen, I don't want you to pay tax. I'd rather have you put money there." That's what the tax code is. It's kind of like a map, so that you don't have to pay taxes, but you're putting money into areas that the government wants you to put money into. Okay, and that's the $20 trillion. So now he used these passive loss rule. I mean, he used some things there, but again, the tax code is really right. Whether it's Warren Buffett or whomever that don't pay a lot of tax or whatever is called the fair share.
Right.
It's because they're putting money into things that are actually helping and stimulating and building companies
and they're
building
getting the
economy.
kickbacks that way.
Yeah, and they're getting the credits that way. So it's kind of like the option is, I pay tax, money goes to the government tries to figure out what to do with it, or I put money into things that I control and things that I'm going to be able to determine as the right place to stimulate the economy.
It's interesting to me because perfect sense. But the way you're describing it is that it's almost you have these one percenters, for lack of a better term, that are stimulating growth through government programs in some cases, and then they're vilified for getting the tax breaks.
Yeah, and it's
doing the government programs that they're getting the breaks to do,
and that's class warfare. I mean, that's where it's saying it's putting the haves versus against the have-nots, and that is really where I think they have to pay their fair share. And people
Well, it
look at
seems
that
really
like, oh yeah, they have to
cannibalistic
do
to
that.
me, though.
But people don't really go into the details where they remove emotion from it and just look at the logical basis for why the tax code exists.
So, man, so many questions here, Patrick. What about a flat tax? Would a flat tax actually work? If you had a candidate that said, because we run into those libertarian candidates a lot that say a flat tax. I think Steve Forbes Jr. Yeah, I think Steve Forbes was the first guy to no, he wasn't a junior, was he? Malcolm Forbes was the. Anyway, he was the first guy in my memory to propose a 10% flat tax. It seemed really attractive to me at the time. It does to this day, but I don't know, because of our deficit, if it would actually work.
Well, also because of how the tax code works right now, you have to look at. So there's two things from a purely kind of philosophical principled standpoint. Yeah, flat tax I think would make more sense. Okay, and this was kind of Reaganomics to an extent. It wasn't flat, but it was basically if you brought taxes down, you would create spending. Okay, which would go into the hands of other people, which would then pay
trickle
taxes.
down.
The trickle down economics idea. But if you look at really how long our tax code, this marginal code with thousands and thousands of pages and statutes, there have been industries created because of those tax incentives. So suddenly, if you go to a flat tax, those industries will be wiped out. So you got to be very careful.
I see.
Right. So if you go into like charities, or you go into low income housing, or you go into oil and gas, you go into other places where they can build business and invest in infrastructure.
Farming, I guess, would fall. Yeah.
So those industries would be drastically affected and create unintended consequences
because we're too dependent on the tax code.
Absolutely. Yep.
So realistically, to get a flat tax to work, it would take probably decades.
It would. You have to wean
step by step. Wean it off.
And I think that would be very, very simple. But I would say, what you have to look at why they're stating flat tax, okay? And it's really to appease their constituents, right? So I would say, especially the libertarian crew, they're very big on low taxes or no taxes, okay? But at the same time, you got to look at
not realistic at all.
Yeah, but you have to look at the unintended consequences. Really, for that to take effect, it's not going to just happen overnight. It's going to take a long time, and it's going to be some unwinding, massive disruption. And I don't know. I mean, I think a weaning process is much better. But you look at, and I would say there's two things from a business standpoint, especially with Trump's economic plan. One of the things which is fascinating to me is he would create kind of like this holiday where those that hold businesses and individuals that hold assets offshore can repatriate at like 10% tax. Okay. And there's I think there's in the last couple of years, like $2 trillion of corporate profits held offshore. And there's like 20 trillion in private American assets held offshore. The reason why they don't bring it onshore is because they would have to pay taxes on that. And the tax rates are really high. I mean, personal income taxes are at 40%. You look at corporate taxes, they're at 35%.
Crazy.
They're super high. So they want to hold it offshore in other jurisdictions, right? So that they don't have to pay taxes
it's
on
safer.
it. So if you look at repatriation, now businesses will have capital in the U.S. The other thing associated with business is when a business makes a decision to invest in this building or this machinery or this project or this workforce, okay, they're not going to get a return overnight. It's going to be 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. So when they look at the uncertainty that exists in taxes, in the economy, in politics, they don't want to make any decisions, okay, because one of the decisions that could happen could totally wipe out, all sorts of planning. So they don't even want to make a move. So the certainty associated with this is what it's going to look like for the next, 5 years or 10 years or whatever, that will help businesses make investment. But if that certainty doesn't exist, then businesses are going to keep doing what they're doing, which is hoarding,
regardless who the candidate is.
Yep. Okay. And that velocity, because you got to realize that $1 in the economy, if a business starts to invest in the economy, okay, that money changes hands, and then that money changes hands, and then that money changes hands. So you have this whole kind of ripple effect, which would totally help to a degree, but it could also cause some inflation issues. So anyway, we're just in such a manipulated economy where I don't know what the right thing to do is.
It's terrifying to hear you talk about this. For a layman, it's somebody that's brand new to the economy. They probably are having trouble even wrapping their brain around this. To an expert, that's terrifying.
Yep.
That's really scary to listen to. So, two questions. I don't even know if you can answer them, but I'm going to try. Okay. You're very educated on the economy. I've heard, you would never say this, I've heard people say that some of the systems that you have put together, some of the strategies you put together are some of the best in the world, which is, you should be very flattered to hear this. So my question for you is, question number one, if it's President Donohoe, you and the First Lady are sitting in the White House, what would you do with the economy?
Well, I would never, ever want anything close to that. I would never want to be in politics, period. Like I'm private. I like my quiet time. And anything remotely close to that.
There is no quiet time, yeah.
No, I mean, I don't know. That's a really hard question.
Yeah, I didn't know if you could answer it, but
I always gravitate toward a person, and this may sound bad, but a person knows what's best for them. And they may not, but in the end, I don't want to tell people what to do. I think people should be able to make their own decisions as long as it doesn't,
and live and die by,
as long as it doesn't violate, my safety and my rights.
Sure.
And looking at taxation, I mean, I think it's so hard. I mean, a perfect world, right? Before 1913, the government worked on no income tax.
Sure.
Right. And even in 1913, only if there's a tiny portion of the population that was taxed, wasn't that much at all. And that's just gotten out of control. So I would say, the main issue, in my opinion, isn't necessarily the tax side of things. It's the Federal Reserve.
Okay.
Because if you look at the Federal Reserve was created in
something we haven't even talked about yet.
We haven't, and this wasn't even addressed in Hillary or Trump's economic plan. But the Federal Reserve was created in 1913. Tax code was created in 1913. So that should tell you something. But if you look at the Federal Reserve allows the government to essentially deficit spend. Okay, because the $1 trillion that they're going into debt each year, right? It doesn't exist right now. Okay, but what the Federal Reserve does is they create it. The government creates bonds, and then the Federal Reserve purchases those bonds, and the money goes to the government, right?
Yeah.
And now they have all this money to spend, and then there's interest on that. Now the government actually, the interest is credited back to them, so there's kind of a zero interest. But the Federal Reserve has really created a precedent throughout the entire world of basically creating money out of nothing, out of thin air, right? And the interest that has to be paid on that comes from tax revenue. So that's where that tax comes from. That's why I said in the beginning, it's like we have $20 trillion of debt. Okay, that's a lot. And I know trillion. We throw that word around.
It's incomprehensible.
You won't be. It's like stadiums and stadiums full of $100 bills, right?
Yeah.
It's just insane how much money that is, and there's interest that has to be paid on it. Where is that interest payment coming from? You look at the tax revenue, $5 trillion. There you go, and that's existed like that for a while. I mean, the Grace Commission that Reagan did, back in the 80s. It said the same thing. It said the majority of tax revenue goes to pay interest on the debt. So it's one of those things where
I hate that so
but
bad.
Unwinding it, right? If you abolish the Federal Reserve, I mean, right now the economy, the markets, lifestyle is so dependent on the policies that exist right now. And if you were to unwind them, it's going to be chaos. But at the same time, if they keep going on, I think it's going to be chaos too. So I don't know. I would say, and I don't think I'm that. I read things, I listen to things, I've kind of put two and two together, but at the same time, I don't know what to do. I don't know. Right now, it's a flawed system, and in my opinion, and this may sound bad, but in my opinion, in order for there to be really a true correction and movement in the right direction, there has to be major disruption. There has to be a major correction. And capitalism, the true nature of capitalism is you let
just
fail.
Ominous, man.
They have to fail.
So grim.
So that's what I'm hoping. It's kind of like my saving grace, okay, is that happens, but then there is the technology compound curve and growth that is taking place is.
So the correction would be quick. It'd be very, very big, but the recovery would be equally as quick.
I hope because of technology and the advances that it's making in healthcare, in computing power, in food production, in transportation, and energy. That's my saving grace, is that will help the rebound.
Are there those that think that correction is coming soon, or?
I mean, there are guys that think it's been coming for 50 years, but there's others that have said it too, and nobody knows. And nobody knows. I mean, it could continue to go on for. I mean, look at Japan. So who really knows? And it's really one of those like black swan events that really is the catalyst to whatever the correction is. I mean, that was 2008, 2009, where you had one bank go under, right? You had Lehman Brothers start to go under. You had Bear Stearns that start to go under because of a market that hardly anybody knew about, which was the derivatives market. And suddenly all these insurance instruments started to have to be, they were triggered and they had to pay out. And it's like, crap, we're bankrupt.
Yeah.
And everybody was trying to figure out what to do, and then the whole thing crumbled. So it had
a massive impact on me. I know it had a massive impact on you.
Yeah.
I know that there's most of the people I know that were in business, that were entrepreneurial at the time, still haven't recovered.
Yeah.
You've recovered nicely. Congratulations. But the talk of that correction is, especially as somebody who is I still have the scars from 2008, 2009. That's just terrifying.
So do I, and that's where my mind is still. Now, coming out of it, I saw so many different things that they were staring me in the face. Yeah. But I didn't see them, and now I see them, and it's helped me, but it's made me not pessimistic, but I would say.
Cautious,
optimistically cautious.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's where individuals really have to to look at who they are and what the true asset is. Most people put their asset as their bank account, their asset as their house, their asset as their car. Yeah. The true asset, I think, is the person, right? And the true asset is your ability to produce. Yeah. Because if it corrects and you have value, right? It doesn't matter what the currency is. Doesn't matter what its value. You can go out, create value. You'll be compensated for it, and you'll pay your bills, whatever they are paid in.
Right. Okay. So now the first question was, what would President Donohoe do? And the answer, obviously was way too complex to address here.
Yeah. It's like abolishing the Federal Reserve, getting rid of. I mean, it's creating the disruption. I would say if I was president, I would say we need to disruption has to happen.
Okay. Wow, you sound like the Joker.
I could be. I don't know if I could be that sinister.
Okay, so the second question I had is, and again, we're trying to be as nonpartisan as we can possibly be. I don't know who you're going to vote for. You don't know who I'm going to vote for. But if this is like fantasy football, who of the two candidates is going to have a more positive effect on the economy if they're elected?
Well, I'll put it two ways. Okay. Because I would say both, but for different reasons. Okay? So I think Hillary would actually have a positive impact on the economy because she would kill it, and that would create the disruption and the correction. So seriously, because
when you said, okay, hold on a sec. When you said she would kill it, I thought, well, that was not the response I was thinking.
Not
she's gonna in a good way. She's gonna kill it.
She will
kill the economy.
Exactly.
Like she's going to destroy the economy.
Exactly. Right.
But that would create the correction that you're
exactly.
I mean,
I'm surprised it didn't happen in Obama's second term. I think it's close. I mean, you look at the student loan debt, you look at incomes, you look at how many people.
I look at the people that have blinders on too. The problem.
That's an understatement. And it's really the amount of debt that exists. And this is the interesting thing. It's like you have the objective of the Federal Reserve and kind of the who's in the Obama administration.
Right.
They want growth. They want 2 to 3% growth. And it's like nobody is spending, nobody is investing, therefore you don't have that growth. But where is money going? Money is going to technology that is deflationary, which is pushing prices down.
Right.
That's the irony. So I would say with the student loan debt, the car loan debt, you even have a lot of speculation going on in development, right? Construction and new homes and a lot of flipping still going on.
Tons.
Prices, nothing can grow to the sky, right? There's always, there's a compound curve, but then it typically corrects into an S curve. So you look at, really where we're at right now. I'm surprised that something hasn't happened because the black swan event hasn't occurred. And it could be, a bond auction that goes bad. It could be, some sort of like, shutdown from a bank shuts down or they do something stupid, Wells Fargo, but it could be like 10 times worse than that.
Right.
So that could be it. Who knows? But I would say it's in a very fragile state right now. And I would say Hillary would push it over the edge.
Okay.
I think her policies would push it over the edge.
Okay, now let's switch to Trump.
Okay.
You said Trump would benefit the economy in what way?
Yeah, so here's and
you're a lot more decisive about Hillary than you are about Trump.
No, I am kind of decisive about Trump. I'm just trying to figure out how to articulate it. So Trump said something interesting a few months back. He said we should just go bankrupt.
The entire nation declare bankruptcy. The government.
So you have to look at what bankruptcy means. Okay. So Trump understands bankruptcy, right? And everyone's like, "Oh, he sucks as a businessman." It's like, and I'm not talking about him as the person, but it's like he tried something. He took a risk. He put money here. He put money there,
which is the American way.
And he took advantage of the bankruptcy code, and it exists for that reason. Right. If you look at really what true bankruptcy is, okay, most people bankruptcy is like you're absolved of all of your liabilities, absolved of all your debt, you have no more responsibilities. That's not true bankruptcy. So bankruptcy is where you have a trustee that takes in all of the assets, has all of the liabilities, and tries to make the creditors of the the liabilities make them as whole as possible given these assets. That's bankruptcy. So looking at restructuring,
and then whatever's left over is wiped away.
Yeah,
correct?
and I don't know if it could survive that. I think there'd be chaos. I mean, it'd create probably World War III. But with Trump, I mean, he's doing the repatriation that could stimulate. He's lowering corporate taxes to 15% ish, which that could stimulate. I mean, he's doing the right things.
He's got massive issues with the VAT tax, which drives me crazy. I'm sure it drives you nuts.
Yeah,
I don't know how much you're dealing with the VAT. I've had tons of dealings with the VAT, and man, it's frustrating.
And I don't know what'll happen, but I would say right now it is bankrupt in my opinion. I mean, you the way it's running, I just can't see it happening much longer because the policies simply don't make sense in my opinion, and I could be totally wrong, right? And so I look at really him, and he understands that. He understands the business side. He understands negotiation, and if it went into that state, I don't think there's a better person to negotiate it. But I still don't think. I still think it's too. I think it's too fragile. But if there's anything that saved it, it would be that.
Okay.
But that's, and I know that's probably not the answer that you were even expecting.
Well, no,
but that's kind of how that's how I logically look at it.
Well, no, I think it's actually a really good answer. I think it's the answer that people are hoping for, which is the real answer. It would be very easy to go, well, Trump sucks and Hillary's awesome, or vice versa. But it's either way, you're going to get that adjustment. It's just in the way it's going to come. I mean, is that really what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, I don't see that it's sustainable. More than a few more years.
Oh,
now, but it could be so. Here's the other thing too: is like you could have like the black swan, but you have the white swan, which is you could have like this, this technology that's created, and suddenly like we have so much, everything, they can do away with the debt, or they can, I don't know. I mean, there's all sorts of anomalies that nobody knows about.
Well, and you know what comes to mind for me, and this is going to sound really oddball, so forgive me, but what comes to mind for me was FDR back in the day, looking at his coming out of the Depression and dealing with the economical issues that he had, and then came the war, and how the war could change everybody's economy. How the war could stimulate industry, and there's all kinds of conspiracy theories out there that he let Pearl Harbor happen, knowing full well what it would do for the economy, and that was the adjustment back then. So you're probably right. It's scary to think. It's really terrifying to think about.
Well, there's a cool book. I don't know. You ever heard of Tom Woods? Does that name ring a bell?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so he has a really cool podcast. Smart guy, but he wrote a book about the Great Depression, and it's fascinating. Maybe we'll post on the show notes. But it's fascinating because he goes in and he talks about, FDR and just the misconception there, which was, FDR saved people from the Great Depression. He actually exacerbated it.
Yeah.
And also the war, most people think, the war is what really, got people out of the Great Depression. It's like, no, there's other economic things that happened.
Am I wrong to think that then?
That's the rhetoric. I mean, that's what
history
believe.
tells you. Yeah, yeah.
Yep. And so this is,
that's interesting.
This is a guide to, really the other side of the coin.
Yeah.
So that you can take everything that we've been taught, which is FDR saved us from the Great Depression.
Right.
Then you can look at the other opinion, and then you can make the decision for yourself. Right. But Tom Wood's really.
What is the name of this book? I think people need to go. It's got to be in the show notes, and people got to go check it out.
It's the Guide to the Great Depression. I can't remember the name of it.
We'll research it. We'll make sure it's in the show notes.
We'll make sure it's in the show notes. Yeah, I haven't read it in a couple years. But Tom Woods is brilliant. I mean, he wrote some of the first books that came out of 2008, 2009. Meltdown specifically. They kind of went into the details of what happened and why it occurred, and it was the contrarian perspective. It wasn't, hey, it was people were being stupid with their credit and they were, taking on more house than they can. Oh, no, it was basically government policy and stimulus by the Federal Reserve and fraud in Fannie Mae and Countrywide, and he went into those details that basically gave the other side of the coin, and that's why I always try to look for. I don't like popular opinion. Now, popular opinion could be right, okay. But at the same time, I don't want to take popular opinion's word for it. I want to know the other argument. The conversation
comes all the way back around to the beginning, because what a lot of these finance guys are saying is not wrong. It's completely right, but unattainable and unrealistic for the vast majority of people that listen to it.
And I would say you need to know both sides. And if you know both sides, that's going to help you make the best decision.
All right, very good. Okay, so listen, before we kill this, I have to ask. You taking you're a well-traveled, learned man. It's not a partisan question at all. I want you to take all of your education and say, who do you think is going to win the election?
Who I think is going to win?
Yeah.
I think who I'm going to vote for.
I'm not asking who you're going to vote for.
I'm still going to vote for Ron Paul, so I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
Oh man, that's hard. If I were to bet, it'd be Hillary.
You think? Yeah.
Yeah.
If you were to place odds in Vegas, you would say.
I'd be curious to see what happened after the debate on Sunday.
Right.
But
okay.
It's one of those. Yeah. I think it could go both ways, but just looking at the connections and looking at the she knows the political game better than anybody, and I think that. Unless Julian Assange comes out with something that's like
huge,
then I think it's gonna be her. And like I said, here's the other thing too is the president, whether it's Trump or Hillary, it's just I don't know. I think the president is not the president role should not be what dictates how the country runs.
There's too many other factors.
I think their primary role is the leader. It's to unite. It's to bring people together. And I don't think we've had that for a long time.
It's been a long time.
It's been a long time.
I would agree with that. Well, listen, you've got to promise me that we're going to do a series at some point here on the Wealth Standard Radio. We're going to do a series where you debunk a lot of the popular finance expert statements and philosophies and platforms. Can we do that?
For sure.
Would you be, I mean, that puts you in a weird spot, but would you?
No, I think, we subscribe on purpose to Money Magazine, which is kind of owned by all the financial firms that are out there. And it is just full of nuggets, and we can just read that stuff and just be like, okay, here's their opinion. This is why it makes sense. It's the motivation, but here's the other side.
Oh, you're going to make so many people mad. I love it.
I don't know. Yeah,
let's do it.
That's good. Yeah, making people mad. I mean, I don't know. I never get mad because I'm wrong a lot, and I'm like, tell me I'm wrong. I mean, so I'll be on the air. Say this, but Jenny, and we have a great relationship with some of our advisors, all the advisors in the office. So she came to my office and said, "Hey, I need to help you with some language scrubbing." And so she came in and said, "Listen, this is what you say, and this is how it comes off." And she said, you say this and this.
She
and this.
called
I'm
it
like,
language scrubbing. That's a new term
and
for me. Okay.
And I was like, man, that totally makes sense. And if I changed it to this, that would basically mean what I really intend. She's like, yep, absolutely. So that's the thing is I think you look in the end of, a person, and if a person is not willing to admit that they're fallible, that they're wrong, that they're that's a big red flag for me, and that's where both Hillary and Trump reside, is in that arena. And I understand why they do it, because they're trying to look the part, be the part, appease their constituents, as well as all the fencers. But in the end, it's like that. I just think a leader is one that has that. They're always learning, they're always improving, they're always willing to introspect and to receive criticism and to really take it hard and say, wow, maybe I should change this or think about that differently. And that's where I'm at. I mean, I could be totally wrong on a lot of things that I say, but I'm always searching for not who's right, but what's right.
Okay, so the next 4 years, regardless of who wins, are going to be better or worse?
I think they're, again, it's you don't know. I think it's going to be better, and this is why. I think there's never going to be utopia. I mean, human beings, we're very, very cyclical, where we have kind of prosperous times, and then we're humbled, right? And things correct, and we learn, and we are resilient, and we come back and we make things better. I mean, this has gone on throughout history, right? And we need that correction.
Oh, it's gone on for me. It's gone on for you.
Yeah, I just see behavior that just, to me, doesn't make sense, and it's irrational. And I think there's some correction that's going to be on. I mean, irrational is why would a parent go into $100,000 of debt for their student to get a degree in something that's going to pay them $30,000 a year? That's happening all over the place, but it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
So and that's just one example. But whether it's houses or cars, or people are making decisions that are irrational, and in order for them to really wake up, they can either say, "Wow, I should change things," or something smacks them on the face,
and they have to change.
Yeah. Right. And that's been my experience. And I basically come to the conclusion that if I'm not open to feedback, and not open to improving, and not open to this and this and this, then
it'll happen.
Something will smack me in the face and have me do it anyway. So what's easier? So I would say the next 4 years, I think it'll be better, because human beings are, we're resilient, we're learning, we're always adaptable. We're adaptable, we're always wanting to progress. And I think we're living in one of the most amazing technological times in history, period. And seeing what's coming down the pipe, I think is very, very exciting, which I think could change the entire landscape of society. And I think you've just set the table for the next 20 podcasts. Okay. Good stuff. Well, thanks for letting me be on the show, man. No, Chunga, you're amazing, man. This has been cool. You're going to have me back? Discussion. For sure. I get to come 100%. Back and be on the Wealth Standard again? 100%. Nice. Whenever, you can be here. You're here. You come whenever you want. Thanks, let's do a series in the next little bit on Money Magazine. Maybe finish off the year with that. Call everybody out. And we'll keep doing the politics stuff, because that's not going to end until November. Well, it's what everybody wants to talk about. For sure. So, yeah. Cool. All right, everyone. Thanks for listening. Again, we're on YouTube, so you can go check us out and see Chunga, the man, the myth, the legend. In all my glory. Yeah, and you can kind of vote whether or not he should be the new Dos Equis guy once the most interesting man in the world, jumps off a cliff and doesn't survive. Sure. But yeah, thanks for listening. Really appreciate it, and we'll talk to you next week. You've been listening to the Wealth Standard Radio Show, your gold standard in everything financial.